Hello, I'm Carwyn Jones, and welcome to this series of podcasts where I'll be talking to members of the business community in Wales. What makes them tick? The movers and shakers. How do they see the future of their business? How do they see the future of Wales? And how do they get into what they're doing now? I'm joined today by Rupert Moon. Rupert is the Head of Business Development at i4 Technology Group, although most people will be familiar with him as a former professional rugby player and member, of course, of the 1994 Five Nations Championship winning team. Rupert, you're very welcome.
Oh, nice to be here. Thanks for inviting me.
So you started off in rugby, we know that, and internationals, famous game against the Australians in '92, and the I wouldn't call it a body slam, but what do you call it? The Ian Evans?
Chesting.
Yes.
Chesting.
With the Ian Evans. A lot of people know about your rugby career, but of course, one of the hot topics at the moment is what happens to athletes when they retire. How do you make that transition from something you've done all your life to something you can't go back to physically? How did you find that, making that transition from professional rugby and then thinking, what do I do now with the rest of my life?
I think it was the grounding that I had as a child. I've got an older brother who's 6 years older and wanted to be a lawyer. I had a sister who wanted to be an accountant and she's 3 years older. And then there's me, who was actually quite good at football and not so bad at rugby. So I had no idea what I was going to do career-wise, and tried a little bit harder in school, wanted to be a professional footballer. It was my get-out clause. And then injury made me have to choose between rugby and football. Rugby it was, because I had more fun in the rugby team when I grew up. But there was never a career at that stage that you could make out of being a professional rugby player. So it was the people business. So I was interested by being a guy who was the captain of the team. So I was good at talking and organising and telling people what to do and not being able to do it myself. And was picked from obscurity to do a bit of media work in the early 90s. Started on ITV Wales and then doing a little bit on the BBC, and did that for a decade and working in X-ray. And I thought that might be a career outside of rugby. So I did it all around what I was doing. But then when the game went professional, they offered us some money to wear a pair of shorts and run around every day. It was quite exciting, but I didn't take a fully professional contract because I always had this belief that I wasn't good enough. So I was always in a team with some great players, and you mentioned some of those incredible occasions that I shared. And I felt like I was a piece of a jigsaw and connected well with players in those teams, and we had success. Rugby was never going to be one that was going to earn me millions. So I thought I'd better use what I had, which was Rupert Henry, St John Barker Moon, looking like Jimmy Nail, and the ability to chat a little bit as maybe the way forward.
Well, you've used that well, anyway. When you retired, you spent some time as an athlete career and education advisor. What was that role? You worked for the Welsh Rugby Union. I mean, was that an early way of trying to help players through that transition? Yeah,
so Graham Henry and the Welsh Rugby Union, and the Welsh Rugby Union was a leader in those days. They used to have...
That's quite advanced for the
They had a guy called Alan Ace, who's still involved in player development, people development, but not with the Welsh Rugby Union. But Alan Ace had done it for the Welsh Rugby Union before, and what Graham Henry had in his vision was to have the holistic approach to players. If you understand the whole person, you'll get the best out of them on that 80 minutes. And he had that and done that in New Zealand quite successfully. So myself and Nigel Walker had a go at it before, was to get to know and trust and get the trust of the player to help understand. And there was an eclectic mix at that time of players that lived some in a bubble because they'd known as rugby players, training full time, never had the opportunity to mix in other environments. And you are the person by the people you meet and share experiences with. And the amateur days allowed me to have some incredible experiences at Abertillery, at Neath and at Llethley, meeting a real cross-section of individuals from Lawrence Delaney, Gareth Jenkins to Nigel Davis and the Royal Ian Evans. And so those experiences shaped me and my personality. Those players playing professional rugby hadn't had the experience of being outside the bubble, real life. So we scratched the surface, we tried to help them, we tried to shape them and tried to make them realise that you're a long time retired, but also try and get some organisation in your life to start planning for the future before the future becomes tomorrow.
Yeah, it struck me. I was watching a documentary couple of weeks ago with Dami Thomas and what he went through when he finished playing, and it hit him very, very hard. And we know that other players have had the same thing. And if you look at professional football, the apprenticeships that football clubs have are actually quite well developed, and there's a strong emphasis on the young players actually pushing themselves academically as well as the football. Rugby was late to the game, we know that, but there's been less of an emphasis over the years on how you do with the other end. Yeah. You're expected 33, 34, you're done, and that's it. You're expected to go off on your own. Yeah,
and I think the academic point was always a rugby strength. When in the amateur days, you were encouraged to play at school, and you were encouraged to stay in school and get educated. I hated school. I didn't like it, but I went through the slower route, the national diploma, high national diploma to degree, and it took me years to get there. But life experiences were the ones that stood me in best stead. And I think when professional rugby started in Wales, the academic aspect of it kind of fell by the wayside because players were encouraged to be the best that they could be on the field, and doing 15 hours a week or 20 hours a week studying wasn't really in their mindset if they were not being pushed. And if you're living away from home or you've got a few £1,000s in your pocket, then it's not something you think about unless someone really encourages you, and also the club or the region encourages you to do so. And so soccer, less people make it, so they realise they have a debt to pay, and also from the age of 6 you're being talent ID'd, and the Manchester school is incredible how they're educated, but when you've got millions or hundreds of thousands in your pocket, you really never need to use it again. And it's sad when you see some of the individuals who blow it all and on a scrap heap, certainly from a soccer perspective. And rugby, I don't think we're going to see that until the next few years, so I hope the changes are happening.
No, I mean, you're right. I think there's a serious problem that's potentially brewing as players realise that what was their living isn't open to them anymore.
Yeah, and I think if you're earning a six-figure sum and you're one of the best, not many jobs in Wales pay six-figure sums at the age of 34, 35 with no work experience.
And I always admire people like Jamie Roberts, who's managed to qualify as a doctor while being a professional plair. Yeah. I mean, does he ever sleep? That's the that's the question I've asked.
Well, you notice he's not married and he hasn't got kids. And I think that, that Ian Evans, did what he did with kids and a wife and became one of the best players in the world and has a business career. And I think that's one of the lessons that players can learn. Anything is possible if you are encouraged and supported to do so, and you have the desire. In North Wales, when I was up there, we were encouraging people to make sure that you had life experiences, so they'd have to do community service, so to speak, if you weren't in employment or education.
When you finished, you went on to other things. You were the commercial director of the Scarlets for a while. You were the general manager for 4 years up in Parc Eirias for the North Wales Development Region. Then left rugby and then went on to WRW, then RNF Property. What prompted you to make that change away from the commercial side of rugby into something very different?
I think it goes back to my days working for Roger Lewis here at the Welsh Rugby Union. I worked for him for a while, and he had sat down and had a chat with me after a year or so and said, look, you need to go away and get some different experiences and come back again, which I did. And it was an enjoyable experience to work in insurance and challenging environment, get out of the bubble of sport and rugby that you knew well, to have that world. And that's an interesting, challenging world, but good. And there was acquisitions and working with people who were buying and selling businesses. And it was, it was something I wasn't totally comfortable with, but learned a lot along the way. When I went into the Scarlets, it was an emotionally rational decision, because the chairman of the Scarlets had asked me to come and help make Parker Scarlets feel like home, because they'd moved from Stradey mid-season. I'd been there a year and it didn't feel like home, and I had a debt to pay to him because he helped us stay in existence from 95, Hugh Evans. It was a tremendous businessman, and I said to my wife that I'm going to be earning this, and we're going to be moving back west, and this is what I'm going to do. And I promised him I'd do 3 years. We were turning over a reasonable amount, but losing a lot of money, and it was operational efficiency. It was working with the people, but understanding it mattered to people's way of life. And then when I did that, the Welsh Rugby Union came back knocking again after 3 years and said, look, we've got a bit of a job in North Wales for you. It's a little bit political, it's a little bit commercial, and it's a little bit rugby. Do you fancy it? And that was Roger Lewis. And I said, yeah, I did. And it was a revelation to go up there, because the thirst for for rugby needed that big glass of rugby water, and the desire was there. And certainly working alongside the chief executive and the corporate strategic director at Conway Council about their ambition, their ideas to develop that county was exciting. And so again, another life experience.
And then, of course, on to WRW and RNF, and now with I4 Technology Group, Head of Business Development. Tell the listeners a bit about I4 Technology and what their line of business is.
Yeah, and that's stepping stone for WRW too. I've got these two roles, so I'm working with Head of Business Development with I4 Technology, and theirs is to connect Wales. Their vision is to connect Wales, to help the speed, but basically to connect Wales, not just think about Cardiff, Swansea and Newport. We are, just like I was when in North Wales, don't forget that we exist, and the rural communities are so key to Wales. It makes us the fabric. That is the fabric of the success of this country. So that opportunity came because I'd met the chairman, Elvid Thomas, back in 2012. Unfortunately, in that period of time, he developed Parkinson's, but he's a fibre entrepreneur. He knows and has a vision of what can be done, and understanding what Welsh Government had talked about over the last decade, asked for someone who could do a little bit of political, a little bit commercial, but also mobilise the communities to listen and understand to what people need. And it sounds simple that we just want to improve the speed, but it's the infrastructure. It's understanding what BT have done, understanding what BT haven't done. But I was up in Conway this week and talking about the continuation of the regeneration of Carwyn Bay. It's incredible what's happened with a joined-up approach between the council, the Welsh Rugby Union, RGC and the NHS and other bodies to collaborate, to come together to make that momentum grow. Because in 2008, you would never have thought about going to Carwyn Bay, the greatest respect for anything. And they've had their challenges of the DSS, unfortunately, changing the way that Carwyn Bay looked, and the challenges of where businesses could grow and develop. And that transition over the last decade has just been monumental, and it's great to see, but that can't just happen alone. And what we're trying to do is follow up and saying, well, the next business generation has got to be about speed of broadband. It has to be making sure that people are connected, and more people want to work from home, and that is, from an operational efficiency point of view, really important for the economy as well.
Well, I've always said that broadband in the 21st century is the equivalent of the railway lines in the 19th. You have to be connected. We had Superfast Cymru, of course, that looked to extend 96% of premises having, I think it's at least 20 megs per second in terms of broadband access. But of course, one question I'd ask is, what can you add to that? Are we talking here about more replacement of copper with fibre optic? Because that's the big change, isn't it?
And I think that is obviously the fact that BT are now allowing people to go into the dark areas, and I think that again is a collaborative approach. It is a recognition that they had an ambition, and I've got friends who work for BT, and their ambition was to be the best it could be, and Wales was at the forefront of that. Unfortunately, the practicalities of it, they've had to focus in areas that are helping them help themselves with the resource. And I think it is important that it's not them alone, and having access to that fibre broadband. And what they're talking about for North Wales is really key as well, is joining up all the public bodies, working with the schools, the NHS, and then tapping into that fibre. And we all know that as soon as the copper starts to get further and further away, then it just slows and slows down. And we are a country of rural communities. So there has to be a plan, and it can't be done in isolation.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. I mean, one of the trends that we've seen over the past 200 years is people leaving the countryside and moving into the towns. I mean, it started in Wales more than anyone earlier than anyone else, I suspect. I mean, my family were the same. They left rural areas and came to work in the collieries, because that was where the money was, basically, and the bright lights of the Avon Valley, and for them it was something that they wanted to do, and there were limited opportunities in the countryside. It's always struck me that if the level of connectivity is sufficient in rural Wales, there's no need to move. Yeah. You can conduct your business in Gwernogle in Carmarthenshire, or you can be in Carwyn or Carwyn, it doesn't matter. And that's why it was always so important to actually get, not to just accept that broadband was something for urban areas. Yeah, I mean, financially, that's where broadband stacks up. But of course, as there was a universal obligation, still is a universal obligation to put in telephone lines, regardless of where somebody lives. So we need to move towards something similar when it comes to broadband.
And I think we have to have disciples of change. You wouldn't think...
Disciples of change.
Disciples of change.
You heard that here first.
Yeah,
disciples of change.
But we do. We did, and as a collective, when I was at RGC, we had that disciple of change because people had to be the ones that said, this can work. And actually, it's the best form of marketing. And as a guy who had a marketing and a title, it's me telling you that it works. And if you trust me, then you'll believe it. And if we've got history together, you'll believe it even more. And if you understand the passion that we have for it, then it will. And it will have this effect that it will cascade outwards. Conway's a rural county. You wouldn't think, would you? Conway's a rural county. You wouldn't think Carmarthenshire is a rural county. But there's lots of areas. It's great. It's got Carmarthen. Fabulous. It's got Clethley, it's got Llandovery, you keep going, but there's a lot of spaces in between, and the same with Conway. It's got Llandudno and it's got Carwyn Bay and Abergele, but there is a bit down within that county, and there are similar sizes with the numbers of 125,000 people, but key, and if you join up those dots, and that's where I'm coming from my I4 bit, and the other project that I work with as a strategy director for R&F Property is working on void properties. We're working with councils to develop the communities, because this is this regeneration. It can't happen on its own. R&F is helping bring back former properties to life, because we have a challenge, because we haven't got enough houses. We're not going to have enough houses. So we need to keep people in the town centres, the ones that came 30, 40 years ago, maybe 50 years ago. We also need to come up with a different plan for the town centre, because we're talking about staying at home. We're talking about regeneration, but it doesn't actually happen in the high street. So it's interesting, Llandudno's got a model where the high street, and Lord Mostyn is maintaining that. Young Lord Mostyn is doing a very successful job to keep the high street going with an out-of-town shopping centre at the end of the high street. Very unique. In Llandovery, it's slightly different in that the out-of-town shopping centre is where my home was, which is Parker Scarlets. And so how does that connect? And we've got some incredible innovations within Carmarthenshire. The Millennium Coastal Path, which is really great. But the joining up the dots, a bit like Cardiff, we've got this fabulous place here, and then the bay, and then there's a gap in between. How are we solving that? What's going to happen? So I'm relishing the opportunity to work with people and understand and collaborate, because it's not R&F Property on their own, it's not I4 Technology on their own, it's councils and others. I was sitting with some guys from the NHS technology people last week at an awards dinner about corporate social responsibility and what difference that would make to rural communities, to be able to have that ability for someone in rural communities to FaceTime their doctor, not have to come in, and the operational efficiency that would have. But if the speed isn't right, they can't do it.
The future, then. What is the future, do you think, in terms of technology, in terms of broadband? Where would you want it to go?
We just need more. We're about, what are we? UK is 7%, Portugal's 89%. We just need to have that ambition. And I think we've shown, Wales has shown, and certainly I'm not blowing wind up your sails and your sails. But
I'm glad you sails.
Yeah, your sails. But as the Welsh Rugby Union has shown, we've had 12 years of, they focused on get the right coaching team, get the right people in place, put the right infrastructure, put the right coaching background. They're taking all their kit to training grounds in Switzerland. They built this house, and Glanmore should be grateful for Glanmore building the house. But what Roger did was invest in the thing that matters most, which is the foundations, which they've done. And my son doesn't know lack of success at international rugby, which is great. In the same way, certainly for the next step for Wales to be at the forefront, we need to invest. There's infrastructure, like you're talking about with the train lines. That's what we need from a technology point of view. We've got to be ambitious. We've got to be creative. We've got to get the brains that help these other diverse businesses to work to understand what they need. And that's the bit I'm loving, is talking to people and I don't just have the answer by myself, but I can certainly push lots of these pieces of the jigsaw together to help it make it happen.
So what does the future hold for Rupert Moon then?
Yeah, look, I was very fortunate to work for 3 years with WRW, who are the guy was a painter and decorator 33 years ago, and now it's about a 60-odd million turnover business, and it came from Kidwelly. And I'm very proud to have worked for them, and the stepping stone to coming in to this range of businesses that I'm supporting and working with is about communication. So I'm in the smile business. Like we talk about disciples of change, I'm one of them, and I just want to infect and give this contagious disease to lots of people, because Wales is important to me. My kids are 13 and my daughter's soon to be 15. I'm going nowhere, and I just want to enjoy what we do, but we can't do it in isolation. We have to do it together.
And how do you see the future of Wales over the next decade or so? What do you think the opportunities are and the challenges?
Well, look, there's some great people out there. I think people are being more ambitious, and what Mark James did at Carmarthenshire Council was tremendous at the head of the game. Wendy Walters is a regen woman. She's a go-getter, and she wants to see change, and it's important that we have the same appetite, same in Pembrokeshire, same in Conway. We've got to be creative, because these areas are all unique. But we just need passionate people who care. We've got passionate supporters that care, whether it's for the Scarlets or the O's or for Wales. That has to then still cascade in the business community. And I've seen some of the people that you've interviewed, and they have an impact, don't they, on making change. You've got to be bold and speak out and say what's possible. Some people know. Some people can just have the bowl and think, well, yeah, the impossible is possible.
And as far as you're concerned, do you see any time where you might go back into rugby, whether it's coaching, whether it's administration, or are those days gone?
Look, I could never be a coach. I could never tell anybody what to do. That's the hardest part. I sit with Gareth Jenkins every few weeks, and we chew the fat of what might have been, and Andy Buchanan's on the Welsh Rugby Union, and I enjoy that. And being a trustee of the Welsh Rugby Charitable Trust keeps me close enough to it. And my involvement at kind of every level. My son plays in the Tumble under-14s, and I'm not even an assistant coach, just a helper and advisor. And at every level, I go and speak at local rugby clubs. My RGC involvement was fantastic, and obviously my Scarlets. I'm a life member, and I do enjoy going to watch. So I'm very fortunate to see it at every level. They've got challenges. They realise there's challenges. Their landscape's changing, but women's rugby is the saviour of Welsh rugby, I see. And it's a bit like what we saw with the most watched TV programme was England playing football the other day at women. Welsh women's rugby will breathe life back into the game in Wales. Where that settles down after the next 5 years will be very interesting. I think rugby club communities are key to the rural success of business as well.
Final two questions then from me, both about your career in rugby. What was the best moment for you, do you think?
Do you know, I can talk about winning a game for Abertillery against Abercrave 10-6 when I fractured my pelvis, and we were playing Abercrave away. That felt like the best moment at that time. And obviously playing for Wales when you never thought you would ever play international rugby, because people say, why did your boy born in Birmingham end up playing for Wales? And it was about living in Wales. I was brought up by people, and the community was in Walsall, where in the 60s and 70s, people had migrated to learn to be teachers at West Midlands Teacher Training College. So Hamilton Jones from Llangennych was a massive influence on me. Arnie Evans from Llanbiangor Arth was a huge influence. Ken Lewis from Blaenau was a huge influence on me, because they talked about what it was like to live in Wales. So as soon as I could, I came. To play here, play international rugby, it's like, it is beyond, I am proof that the impossible is possible. But that, you kind of have that, it's a blur. Second time round, the occasions I remember are blurry just because you're so tired and you tried so hard. So when I watch back at them, it's kind of going, that's not real. That was something different. But the Scarlets, obviously, something very close to my heart. And it's, Gareth Jenkins is like my adopted father. Took care of me, guided me, and as others did. So that game against Australia has to be up there, because how can a little town of, 25,000 people, we had in Buryport, maybe about 50, beat the world champions? It isn't possible, but we did. Others have, but we did it in a way that we backed it up from over history as well.
Well, the old joke is, of course, that Swansea beat them by more, but Swansea played the Wednesday team.
Yeah. You said it. You said it. You said it.
I was at that game, the Swansea-Australia game. I watched the Llanelli game on TV, but I remember it was a great win and a great game. And your worst moment? Difficult moment?
I think.
You had a bit of an altercation with Phil Pugh, didn't you?
Yeah, many people have broken my nose. My nose is like a magnet for the big players. Dale McIntosh, Phil Pugh, I can name a few. I've had a pop at it, but I think worst moments. I think from a rugby career point of view, any time you lose, because if you care, then it's the worst moment. But the best thing is you get to put it right and have another go. And Abbotsbury, we lost more than we won. But that gave me a desire and understanding that life is like that. Life, you lose more than you win. Ask Richard Branson. So you've got to have a strength of conviction, but it's about who's around you to inspire you, motivate you, and bring you back out to step out, and shoulder to shoulder you go again.
You said you're in the smile business. That reminds me of a photograph taken of you playing in Glenheath, covered in mud, with a massive smile on your face, having scored a try with your gum shield. The days when rugby was played in a fair bit of mud all those years ago. But Rupert, it's been a great pleasure to have you here, and the best of luck for the future.
Thank you very much.